President, I want to compliment the distinguished senator from Nevada for his very cogent remarks. They're true, and I appreciate his leadership on this matter. Madam President, the Senate is currently debating the so-called Bring Jobs Home Act, a bill supposedly aimed at preserving and creating jobs in the United States. However, as I noted here on the floor yesterday, the Bring Jobs Home Act is little more than a political posturing and election year messaging. It really does get old. We're going through that over and over while we don't do really what we ought to do for this country. The Senate Democrats want to portray the Republicans as a party of outsourcing, which is a joke. So they've crafted a bill that will do nothing to actually address the problem of outsourcing, but will provide them with a few days' worth of talking points on the subject. We went through precisely the same exercise in 2012. We voted on the exact same bill during the last election cycle. It was meaningless then, and it's meaningless now. Like I said, I went over this yesterday. I talked at some length about the shortcomings of this bill, and I don't want to rehash all of that again today. Instead, I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about some things we could be doing to create and protect American jobs. I found some amendments to this bill that I think would actually do something along these lines. And if we get a chance to offer amendments to this bill, which is of course doubtful under the way the Senate is currently being run, I think these are the type of amendments that we should consider. One of my amendments is a 4-part tax amendment that would help businesses create jobs in the United States. If enacted, it would provide additional cash flow for businesses and would allow them to hire workers, increase wages, and invest in plant and equipment in the United States, among other things. It would do so by making 4 separate temporary tax provisions permanent. The first of these provisions relates to Section 179, small business expensing. My amendment would permanently increase the amount of equipment, certain real property, and software that a business can deduct in a year to $500,000 and index that amount to inflation. That makes sense. The second provision would make bonus depreciation permanent, allowing businesses to permanently deduct 50% of the cost of qualified property in the first year that property is placed in service. My amendment would also make the research and development tax credit permanent, increasing the alternative simplified credit to 20% and eliminating the traditional research and development credit test. Finally, the amendment would permanently provide for a full exclusion of capital gains income derived from sale of stock of certain small subchapter C corporations held on a long-term basis. All of these would be tremendous amendments that would really create jobs. They ought to be allowed on this bill. Together, these 4 provisions would provide much-needed certainty for job-creating businesses and allow companies to more effectively plan for the future. If we're going to amend the tax code in the name of creating jobs, this is a far better approach as it removes uncertainty and simplifies elements of the code. The Bring Jobs Home Act would actually do the opposite. I've also found 2 health-related amendments to this bill. The first of these amendments would repeal the medical device tax that was included as part of the so-called Affordable Care Act. Obamacare's $24 billion tax on life-saving and life-improving medical devices is reducing U.S. employment. A recent study by industry group AdvaMed estimated the cost has cost as many as 165,000 jobs. That's 165,000 American jobs eliminated by this misguided tax. 10% of respondents to that survey have relocated manufacturing outside of the country or expanded manufacturing abroad rather than in the U.S. This would help solve the inversion problem, but our colleagues on the other side just won't do anything about it. And yet they're trying to blame the Republicans for the inversion? Give me a break. The tax is also curbing American innovation. 30% of the AdvaMed survey respondents have reduced their investments in research and development. 30%. If we really want to keep companies from moving American jobs offshore, this is a far better approach. It's far more substantial, and as the survey data shows, it will have an immediate, real-world impact on jobs in the U.S., and it's bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats support repeal of the medical device tax. Last year, 79 senators on this floor, including 34 Democrats, voted to repeal the tax. It really is a no-brainer, Madam President. I hope we can finally get a vote on it, but sooner or later we're going to get a vote on that. And it's going to be on a bill that will pass both houses. My other health care amendment would repeal Obamacare's job-killing employer mandate. As we all know, the so-called Affordable Care Act requires employers with 50 or more employees to provide health coverage to their workers or pay a $2,000 tax per employee. This deters business growth as it discourages small businesses from hiring more than 50 employees and has led many employers to cut workers' hours to keep from going over the mandate's threshold. How stupid can we be? Even the administration has acknowledged that the employer mandate is harmful. They've already delayed it several times in hopes of delaying its harmful impact during an election year. Isn't that nice? If we really want to keep people in their jobs and encourage businesses to hire more American workers, repealing the employer mandate would go a long way. My last amendment would advance U.S. trade policy by renewing Trade Promotion Authority. Specifically, the amendment contains the text of the Bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities Act of 2014, a bill I introduced in January along with Chairman Kemp of the House Ways and Means Committee and former chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Baucus, Max Baucus of Montana. This bill establishes 21st century congressional negotiating objectives and rules for the administration to follow when engaged in trade talks, including strict requirements for congressional consultations and access to information. If the administration follows these rules, the bill provides special procedures to more quickly move a negotiated deal through Congress. Renewing TPA, which expired in 2007, is necessary to successfully conclude ongoing trade negotiations such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP negotiations, as well as free trade agreement talks with the European Union, often referred to as TTIP, involving 38 nations, including ours, or 28 nations, including ours, I'm sorry. These are two landmark trade deals with the potential to greatly boost U.S. exports and create jobs here. The TPP countries, which represent many of the fastest growing economies in the world, accounted to 40% of the total U.S. goods exports in 2012. Think of the jobs that would be created. Another European Union, purchased close to $460 billion, with a B, in U.S. goods and services that same year, supporting 2.4 million American jobs. In addition, the U.S. is negotiating the Trade and Services Agreement, or TISA, with 50 countries covering about 50% of global GDP and over 70% of global services trade. This agreement would create many opportunities for U.S. jobs in this critical sector. It is vital that we get these trade agreements over the finish line, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is to renew Trade Promotion Authority. My amendment provides a reasonable bipartisan path forward on renewing TPA and would do far more to create jobs and grow our economy than the legislation before us today, which is minuscule in effort. As with other amendments, I hope we can vote on this TPA amendment. Of course, I'm not the only senator who's offered reasonable job-creating amendments to the Bring Jobs Home Act. Numerous amendments have already been offered, and I'm sure that more are on the way, or should I say filed, because we've been prohibited from really offering amendments on these bills and really having a robust debate for a long time now because of the actions of the current leadership of the Senate. The Senate is hardly operating as the Senate always has in the past, and that is in an effective, let's be positive way. Sadly, if the recent past is any indication, there won't be any votes on the amendments to this bill. The Bring Jobs Home Act is not designed to create jobs. It's not even designed to pass the Senate. Once again, the entire purpose of this bill is to give Democrats some political talking points as the August recess approaches. Having an open and fair debate on amendments would distract from this partisan goal. We understand that. We understand that everything is partisan around here right now and everything is political right now. But my gosh, when are we going to start acting like the United States Senate? But that being the case, it's doubtful that any amendments are going to be considered on this legislation, which is, of course, a crying shame. The stated purpose of this bill is to create and protect American jobs. Republicans have amendments that would do just that and more. I've just mentioned a few such amendments that would have a far greater impact on American workers and businesses than the bill before us today, most of which are bipartisan amendments. That's what's amazing to me. So this is just a game that's being played, and it's really an irritating game to me. If we're serious about this idea of creating jobs in the U.S., let's have a real debate about it. Let's discuss some alternative approaches. I know my friends on the other side will have great ideas on some of this if they were just allowed to act like legislators for a change. Let's talk about the real problems that are hampering job growth, and let's vote on some of the ideas that we've proposed. I hope that we can do that this time around. But of course, I'm not under any illusions that the Democratic leadership here in the Senate is about to change course and let this body function the way it's supposed to. They're not about to let the Senate be the Senate. They're not about to let both sides have a full-fledged opportunity to improve these bills. They're not about to allow full and fair debate on both sides. To me, it's mind-boggling. In the case of this bill, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we can get amendments up that would really make this bill a real bill about jobs instead of just politics. But sadly, I don't think I'm wrong. My experience has been that politics are triumphant around here, and getting the people's work done is secondary. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.